Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. This happened in early 2022, during the height of the pandemic, when remote content creation was becoming more prevalent. I was hired as a content creator for a mid-sized university that wanted to boost their online presence through YouTube, particularly to attract international students during the COVID restrictions. The pay was modest, around $3,500 USD monthly, and despite the growing creator economy, finding someone who could handle both educational and promotional content was still challenging. On my second day, Lily, my manager, presented me with my KPI, 85 videos ranging from 10 minutes each to be completed in 52 weeks. For anyone in the industry, this was clearly impossible for a single person to achieve. The role required me to handle everything: script writing, production planning, finding and coordinating with student volunteers for interviews, filming, creating background music — they refused to pay for licensed music — and editing. I had to use my own equipment because their outdated tech couldn't handle 4K recording or even decent 1080p. I understand it seems overwhelming, Lily said with what seemed like a genuine smile. But trust me, if the quality is there, the numbers won't be the main focus. Are you sure about that? I asked, somewhat skeptically. Absolutely, she assured me. Quality over quantity, always. Based on her conviction, I decided to give it a shot. The first month went smoothly until Lily discovered I vaped. Her attitude shifted dramatically overnight. My colleague Jessica actually winced when I mentioned it during lunch. "Oh no," Jessica said, shaking her head. "Lily's got this thing against anyone who vapes or smokes. She tried to get Tom from marketing fired last year for the same reason." The nitpicking started immediately. "You're 10 minutes late," she'd say, ignoring the fact that I'd stayed until 9 p.m. the previous night. "Your desk area smells like vanilla vape," or "Why aren't you answering emails during your lunch break?" I kept my head down and focused on producing high-quality content. Then, 5 months into the job, I was summoned to Director Baker's office. Lily was already there, wearing what I can only describe as a barely concealed smirk. "We need to discuss your performance," Director Baker began, her tone formal. "You've only completed 30 videos out of the required 85, and we're almost halfway through the year." "With all due respect," I countered, "I've been working 6-day weeks, often 12 hours a day. These videos have the highest engagement rates in the university's YouTube history, and Lily specifically told me that quality was the priority over quantity." "That's not what we agreed to," Lily interrupted, her voice sharp. "The KPI clearly states 85 videos." Director Baker raised her hand to silence Lily. "The numbers are the numbers. We need to terminate your contract." "How do you plan to complete the remaining videos?" I asked, already forming a plan. Lily scoffed. "We'll hire a professional production house to finish what you couldn't." Director Baker gave Lily an odd look but nodded in agreement. "Lily will handle the transition." That's when I realized my advantage. As the resident content expert, I maintained our database of production houses. Lily, with no industry contacts, would definitely use my list. So, I modified all the contact information except for one company where my friend Mike worked as a junior director. I called Mike that evening. "Hey, I've got an opportunity for you," I explained my plan. "It's a win-win. You get a major contract and I get a standard 15% finder's fee." Mike didn't hesitate. "Let me connect you with our GM right now." The pitch meeting went exactly as planned. Using my insider knowledge, Mike's team presented a perfect proposal that aligned with the university's vision. They secured the contract immediately. Production house rates in 2022 were substantial. Each video cost roughly $7,000 to produce, but they could complete one every few days with their full crew. They produced 50 videos in 4 months, billing over $350,000. My finder's fee came to about $52,500. 15 months of my original salary. I used the money to fund a specialized digital media course and took a much-needed vacation. But the story didn't end there. Jessica called me while I was lounging at a beachside resort in Phuket. "You won't believe what happened," she said, barely containing her excitement. "Lily got fired. The chancellor discovered the content creation project had a total budget of $60,000, but Lily approved spending over $350,000 without proper authorization. She was so desperate to prove she could deliver the videos that she completely disregarded the budget protocols." "What about Director Baker?" I asked. "Got a formal warning. Turns out she wasn't fully aware of the budget situation either." So not only did I secure a year's worth of pay after being unfairly terminated, but Mike got promoted to senior director thanks to the project's success, and Lily learned a valuable lesson about karma and budget management. The next one is an entitled people story. This whole nightmare started when my beloved grandmother passed away last spring. She left me her charming little cottage in a quiet lakeside community about an hour outside the city. I'd spent countless summers there as a kid, and it meant the world to me that she wanted me to have it. The cottage wasn't anything fancy, just a cozy two-bedroom with a wraparound porch and the most amazing view of the lake. My grandmother had lived there for over 30 years, keeping it in perfect condition. I was so excited to make it my own home, especially since my apartment lease was ending in a few months. What I didn't know was that the community had formed a homeowners association, HOA, about 5 years ago. My grandmother, being the sweet but stubborn woman she was, had refused to join. She was grandfathered in, meaning she didn't have to follow their rules. However, the HOA agreement had a clause stating that upon transfer of property, the new owner would automatically become a member. I found this out later, but by then it was too late. Enter Karen Carter, the HOA president. Picture a middle-aged woman with an asymmetrical bob haircut who treated the HOA rulebook like it was the Constitution. I never actually got to meet her in person before everything went down, which makes what happened even more insane. I was taking my time getting moved in because I wanted to properly sort through my grandmother's belongings and decide what to keep. I'd visit the cottage every weekend, slowly packing things up and making plans for minor renovations. The property taxes were paid, utilities were current, and everything was legally transferred to my name through probate. About 6 weeks after my grandmother's passing, I drove up to the cottage for another weekend of sorting and packing. But something was wrong. There was a sold sign in the front yard and a moving truck was parked in the driveway. My hands shaking, I parked on the street and ran up to the house. A couple I'd never seen before was directing movers who were carrying furniture into my house. "Excuse me?" I called out. "What's going on here? This is my property." The woman looked confused. "We bought this house last week. We have all the paperwork." My heart was pounding. "That's impossible. I inherited this house from my grandmother. I have the deed and everything." Her husband pulled out his phone and showed me their purchase agreement. Sure enough, there it was. A legal-looking document showing they'd bought the property from the Lake Vista HOA for $275,000. The cottage was worth at least $400,000. I immediately called the police. When they arrived, both sides showed our paperwork. The officers said it appeared to be a civil matter and advised me to contact a lawyer right away. I was literally watching strangers move into my house, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I called my friend Lily, who's a real estate attorney, and she agreed to meet me for coffee right away to look over everything. When I showed her the documents, her eyes went wide. "This is completely illegal," she said, scanning through the papers. "The HOA has no authority to sell a property they don't own, even if you were in violation of HOA rules, which you couldn't have been since you just inherited the place. They would need to go through a legal process, including multiple notices and a court order before any kind of foreclosure." "So, what happened?" I asked. Lily dug deeper into the paperwork. It turned out that Karen and the HOA board had sent multiple violation notices for unmowed grass, peeling paint, and other supposed infractions to the cottage's address, knowing full well no one was living there yet. When there was no response, they used their own bylaws to impose fines, which obviously went unpaid because I never received them. Then they used these unpaid fines as justification to foreclose on the property and sell it, completely bypassing the actual legal system. They had essentially stolen my house and sold it to unsuspecting buyers. "This is fraud, pure and simple," Lily said. "We need to file an emergency injunction to stop these people from taking full possession, and then we're going to sue the HOA board members personally as well as the HOA itself." The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings. Lily was amazing, quickly getting a temporary restraining order that prevented the buyers from moving in completely. The poor couple who'd bought the place were horrified to learn they'd been part of a fraudulent sale. Thankfully, they had title insurance and were cooperative once they understood the situation. During the discovery phase of the lawsuit, we uncovered emails between Karen and other board members that were absolutely damning. They had specifically targeted my grandmother's cottage because it was one of the few properties not under HOA control. Karen had written, "Once the old lady's gone, we can finally get that eyesore up to our standards. Her heir won't know what hit them." There were also emails showing they knew exactly who I was and how to contact me at my actual address. They had just chosen to send the violations to the empty cottage instead. It was all part of their plan to seize the property. The judge was furious when he saw the evidence. Not only had the HOA committed fraud, but they had also violated multiple state real estate laws and their own bylaws in the process. The sale was immediately voided, and the buyers were refunded their money through their title insurance. But that wasn't the end of it. Lily helped me go after them for punitive damages. We sued the HOA as an organization and the board members personally for fraud, emotional distress, and legal costs. Karen tried to claim she was just following HOA procedures, but the email evidence showed clear premeditation. The other board members, realizing they were personally liable, quickly turned on Karen. They revealed that she had pressured them into going along with her scheme, even though several had expressed concerns about its legality. 2 board members even agreed to testify against her in exchange for reduced personal liability. During her deposition, Karen's true colors really came out. She ranted about how my grandmother had been a troublemaker who never fit in with the community standards. When asked about sending notices to an empty house, she claimed she was just following procedure, but then couldn't explain why she'd ignored the proper legal address that was clearly listed on the property deed and tax records. "You don't understand," she said, getting more agitated. "That cottage is an embarrassment to our community. The paint color doesn't match our approved palette. The garden is too natural looking. It brings down all our property values." My lawyer just let her keep talking, as she dug herself deeper and deeper. By the end of the deposition, even her own lawyer looked defeated. The case never made it to trial. Once Karen's testimony was on record, the HOA's insurance company realized they needed to settle. They offered a significant sum. I can't disclose the exact amount, but let's just say it was enough to completely renovate the cottage and set up a healthy legal defense fund for any future HOA issues. Karen was forced to resign from the board and sell her house. Turns out most of her neighbors were secretly glad to see her go. I later learned she'd been terrorizing the community for years with her extreme enforcement of HOA rules. The best part? The judge's final order included a provision that my grandmother's property would retain its grandfathered status, meaning the HOA has no authority over my cottage. I can paint it any color I want, plant whatever garden I like, and there's nothing they can do about it. I've been living in the cottage for 6 months now, and I absolutely love it. The new HOA board is much more reasonable, and several of my neighbors have apologized for not speaking up sooner about Karen's behavior. I've even made some good friends in the community. Last week, I finished painting the cottage a lovely shade of blue. Not on the HOA's approved color list, of course. As I was touching up the trim, one of my elderly neighbors walked by and smiled. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she said. "She always said this place needed a splash of color." I later heard through the grapevine that Karen tried to buy a house in another HOA community nearby, but they rejected her application after Googling her name and finding news articles about our case. Karma really does come back around. The whole experience taught me a lot about standing up for myself and not letting bullies get away with their schemes, no matter how official they try to make them seem. I'm grateful for friends like Lily who helped me fight back, and for the justice system that ultimately worked as it should. My grandmother's cottage is now officially bully-proof, and I plan to honor her memory by keeping it just as unique and special as she was. The garden is wilder than ever. The paint is definitely not HOA approved, and I recently installed a bright yellow front door, just because I can. Sometimes when I'm sitting on the porch watching the sunset over the lake, I think about how my grandmother would react to this whole crazy story. I think she'd be proud that I fought for her home and probably get a good laugh out of Karen's downfall. After all, she spent years dealing with nosy neighbors trying to tell her what to do with her property. As for me, I've learned that home isn't just about having a place to live. It's about standing your ground and protecting what matters to you. And sometimes that means taking on a Karen in her HOA rulebook, no matter how intimidating they might seem. I still keep all the legal documents in a safe place, just in case anyone else gets any funny ideas about trying to steal my home. But somehow, I don't think that's going to be a problem anymore. The story of what happened to the last HOA president who tried it has become something of a local legend. My blue cottage with its yellow door stands as a cheerful reminder that sometimes the little guy can win, justice can prevail, and Karens don't always get their way. And every time I pull into my driveway, I smile knowing that this is exactly how my grandmother would have wanted it. Update. 1 year later. I didn't think I'd need to update this story, but some pretty interesting things have happened in the past year that I wanted to share. Remember how I mentioned Karen had trouble buying a new house? Well, it gets better. Last month, I was having coffee with my neighbor Betty, the one who commented on my blue paint job, when she showed me an article from the State Real Estate Commission's website. Turns out, Karen had been trying to work as a real estate agent in a town about 50 miles away. When they did a background check and found out about our case, they denied her license application. The commission cited fraudulent practices and dishonesty in real estate transactions as the reason. But here's the really satisfying part. My case has actually helped other people. Lily, my rockstar lawyer, told me she's been contacted by 3 other lawyers handling similar HOA fraud cases. They've used our case as a precedent to stop other power-hungry HOA boards from pulling the same kind of stunts. One case was particularly similar. An HOA in the next county tried to force a sale on a deployed military service member's house. They backed down real quick when the lawyer showed them what happened in my case. Lily said the judge in that case specifically referenced our lawsuit when issuing a restraining order against the HOA. I've also gotten involved with a homeowners' rights advocacy group. We're working to get state legislation passed that would put stricter controls on HOA powers and require more transparency in their operations. The bill is currently making its way through committee, and I've been asked to testify about my experience when it goes to a vote. The new HOA board here has completely changed how things operate. They created an appeals process for violations and required that all violation notices be sent by certified mail to the owner's legal address of record. They also added a rule that any attempt to force a sale of property has to be approved by 75% of all homeowners, not just the board. I ran into one of the former board members at the grocery store last week, one of the ones who testified against Karen. She apologized again and told me something interesting. Apparently, Karen had been running what amounted to a protection racket with local contractors. She'd find minor violations on people's homes, then recommend specific contractors to fix them. Turns out she was getting kickbacks from these contractors. The district attorney is looking into it now. My cottage has become something of a symbol in the community. 3 other houses on my street have been painted non-approved colors since my case was settled. One neighbor even put up a garden gnome collection, something that was strictly forbidden under Karen's reign. The new board just laughs it off and focuses on actual important issues like maintaining the community pool and fixing the streets. Remember that couple who almost moved into my house? We've actually become friends. They bought a different house in the community and have been great neighbors. They told me they're actually glad things worked out the way they did. Their title insurance covered all their losses, and they ended up with a better house that didn't come with any legal drama. The settlement money I received went to good use. Besides renovating the cottage, I set up a legal fund to help other homeowners fight back against HOA abuse. Lily helps administer it, and we've already helped 2 families keep their homes from similar fraudulent actions. I had a funny moment last week when I was installing a new mailbox. Definitely not HOA approved. It's shaped like a little cottage. A car slowed down as it passed my house, and I recognized Karen's sister in the passenger seat. She quickly looked away when she saw me, and the car sped off. Word is that Karen moved in with her sister in another state after she couldn't find a house here. Guess my little blue cottage with its yellow door was the last property she'll ever try to steal. My grandmother's old friends stop by regularly to have coffee on the porch. They love sharing stories about how she used to drive the neighbors crazy with her non-conforming garden and her refusal to join their precious HOA. One of them brought me a photo album she'd found full of pictures of the cottage over the years. There's one from 1985 where it was painted bright purple with orange trim. I'm keeping that color scheme in mind for the next paint job. The whole experience changed me in ways I never expected. I used to avoid conflict and try to keep everyone happy. Now I know that sometimes you have to stand up and fight, even when it's uncomfortable. It's not just about a house. It's about not letting bullies get away with pushing people around. Lily and I still meet for coffee regularly. Last time she told me she's added HOA defense as a specialty on her law firm's website. She's gotten so many cases from people dealing with similar issues that she's hired another lawyer just to handle them. She jokes that Karen's greed accidentally created a whole new branch of her practice. As for me, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The cottage feels more like home than ever. The garden is thriving, still wonderfully wild and natural. I added a small vegetable patch this year, definitely not on the HOA's approved landscape list. I share the tomatoes and cucumbers with my neighbors, who have all stopped caring about such silly rules. Sometimes people driving by slow down to look at the infamous blue cottage that took down a corrupt HOA president. I just wave and smile, knowing that my grandmother would absolutely love what her little act of rebellion started. The cottage isn't just a home anymore. It's a reminder that standing up for what's right is always worth it, even when the odds seem stacked against you. And you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way. The next one is a malicious compliances story. A few years ago, I worked at a mid-sized company where the atmosphere was, let's say, not ideal. The manager had this ever-growing suspicion that people were just waiting for the right time to leave. He believed that morale was low, and that the team was barely holding it together. And while I'm not sure where he got this idea, he started imposing more and more controls on us to monitor productivity. One day, he introduced a new rule. Every task, every email, every conversation must be logged. No exceptions. The justification? I need to know exactly what you're doing, and I need to be sure nothing's falling through the cracks. Now, here's the problem. My team was already working at full capacity, dealing with multiple tasks every single day. But suddenly we were being told to log everything. If you were sending a simple email, you had to log it. Writing a report, log it. Setting up a meeting, log it. Every little action had to be documented. I tried explaining how ridiculous this was, but the response was always the same. I need to make sure you're on task. He didn't trust us to do our jobs, so he created a system where every move had to be tracked and validated by someone else. I didn't see any way out of it, so I decided to comply. But I wasn't going to make it easy. I started logging everything, and I mean everything, down to the smallest tasks. Simple emails, logged. A quick 10-minute meeting to touch base, logged. I even started logging the amount of time I spent thinking about the best way to word my emails, because hey, it was part of the task, right? To top it off, I made sure my logs were detailed as hell. I meticulously logged every action, no matter how insignificant. The result? It was chaos. The logs were piling up, but all they did was waste more of my time. The manager was reviewing everything and asking questions about tasks that had no bearing on the big picture. Meanwhile, I could barely get through a day without constantly being interrupted by the need to document my every move. And then it happened. The manager finally asked, "Why is everything taking so long?" I gave him a simple reply. "You asked for everything to be logged." He didn't like hearing that. But the best part was when he finally realized that the whole system was making us less productive. His solution? We were told to just log what's necessary. The policy was quietly dropped and things slowly started to return to normal. But by then, I had already built something of my own. After all the frustration of logging every single action, I realized there had to be a better way. So I started building a tool that could automatically track everything, without the annoying back and forth or wasted time. I wasn't looking to change the whole company. I just wanted a way to do my job without all the micromanagement. What started as a workaround eventually grew into a full-fledged solution, and I realized that this frustration had pushed me to create something far more effective than the system we were using. Funny how the lack of trust can sometimes spark the most innovative ideas. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.